interest in psychedelics or the business of psychedelics and where it might be headed, you're going to want to listen to this conversation that I had with my friend Sheva. Welcome back to Magical Soup. Well, the soup of the day today is once again mushroom. I mentioned it in the last podcast, so I figured with the recent passage of Prop 122 and Colorado legalizing a bunch of different psychedelics, who better to talk to than my friend Sheva, who has been one of the people on the front lines of this decriminalization of psychedelics. She runs a consulting company where she helps entrepreneurs break into the cannabis industry and now the psychedelic industry. She is a thought leader in the space and just has a ton of really great insights into where this could all be heading. So if you're curious at all about psychedelics and the business of psychedelics, buckle up because this is a great conversation. It's so nice to see you. How are you feeling? Let's talk about this because I identify you with this psychedelic revolution, renaissance, whatever that's happening here. And I feel like if I were you, I would be like, I don't know, doing like a little happy dance every day.
I have been doing happy dances. I just got back from Vegas late last night for a cannabis conference. And part of why I went was because they had a psychedelic day before the conference started. There was a big psychedelic day of discussions. And that's really what I wanted to go to. And so that was really, it was just, and I went in skeptical because sometimes the messaging with these like big cannabis organizations could be very cannabis centric. But this one was I was very impressed. And I actually met some of the producers of the event and talked to them. And I was very pleased with the messaging that they came forward with, which is obviously decrim first, regulation, small business, small opportunity, access, equity, and then outside of that, research and biopharma and all of the other big projects that are happening.
You're already like 10 steps ahead in terms of what the business looks like and how that's going to unfold. But from a retail street level, like I really feel like this is such an enormous turning point in mental health, really. Do you sense that too? Or is it your brain is so tactical that you're just like in that space of, okay, let's go time?
No, actually, no. I mean, honestly, my excitement is a lot that this is a very advanced and developed decriminalization effort first. And so as soon as the bill gets ratified, we are legally able to possess, store, use, process, transport, obtain, and consume mushrooms as of right now. And with that comes the opportunity to also serve. So you can facilitate ceremony legally in Colorado and offer opportunities for people to try psychedelics, try mushrooms particularly, right away. And so there's kind of like, there's three pieces to this. There's the decriminalization. That is the part that I think most people are most excited about, because growers and sharing with our friends and being able to sit in ceremony in safety. So that's one big piece. The other big piece is obviously the regulations that are coming, which we'll talk about in more depth. And then, of course, the record sealing for anybody who's had issues with the law around psychedelics.
Oh, I didn't even know that was part of the equation. Interesting. Let me back up a little bit because I think of you as this awesome, fun friend who I've had this really lovely connection with, but you're also this like badass businesswoman and you're on the front lines. And I think it would be really helpful to just sort of paint the picture of what your involvement has been in cannabis and in psychedelics.
Okay. Yeah, I know. You and I, we could just jump right into things. It's so easy. Well, let's see. Okay, so I've been in the cannabis space for almost 8 years now. I started, selling high-end boutique products in Colorado and evolved into selling services and being able to help entrepreneurs and craft business plans, train on compliance expectations, craft applications for licensing, whether it's competitive or non-competitive license. So, some states have only finite limit licensing for businesses, and some are just open. And so to be able to help educate people about how they can get into the industry, what they need, what kind of team they need, what kind of cannabis experience they need, what their real estate is, what kind of funding they need. Those are sort of the four main areas. And then to be able to help onboard entrepreneurs into the cannabis industry. And so, a lot of my commitment in the cannabis space is to help the small people, the small guys, the small entrepreneurs, to be able to educate them about what it takes to start a dispensary, to open a grow, to have a manufacturing lab, and what that process looks like, and to be able to help introduce them to people that they would need for their team to bring in cannabis talent and put it all together in a way that helps them get to the starting line. And then beyond that, to be able to help do compliance audits so that, when the state comes and when, not if, the state comes to audit your facility, that everything is up front. And so that's what I've been doing in cannabis for the last 7 years. It's a pretty distinct industry with a lot of challenges. And so to be able to help people understand what they need to know to get through the process and walk them through it. And then as we move forward, my dream is to be able to help support the entrepreneurs in the psychedelic space. My vision is to be in the conversation. I heard somebody say at the cannabis conference that I just came home from that she was on a listening tour in psychedelics. And that concept just blew my mind. Like, she literally is in the psychedelic space to ask questions and listen to what the people want and need. And so for me, my ideal would be to listen for what is coming, help design it from the background on how it could be more sustainable, more equitable, more accessible, less expensive, more diverse, and to be able to offer support to all of my friends and their friends, and of course, everyone at large, on how to get into these industries, both as a consumer as well as a producer or an entrepreneur.
I guess it kind of snuck up on me. I know it didn't sneak up on you, but I think I was probably thinking it wasn't going to pass because it didn't in California, right?
Well, in California, it never even really started. There were limitations on decriminalization, and that really put a pause on everything. A lot of activists in this space, a lot of the grassroots community do not want any limits, because once you have limits, then you have government oversight, and then they can criminalize people, so then that kind of takes the whole, situation out of the hands of the people. And so it didn't move forward in California because of issues with limitations. And so in Colorado, you can cultivate and share all the mushrooms.
all the mushrooms.
I actually was really happy to see that there were a lot of people being very discerning and doing a lot of due diligence. And that really kind of leveled up the community access to this bill. It really helped invite community into the conversation, and, diversity of opinions. Like, that's important. I think people are excited about starting the conversation. This bill is not perfect. It's not perfect. It'll never be perfect, and you'll never please everyone, and so the goal is to craft a starting point. And once we have a starting point, then there's room for more discussion, and now there's a lot more eagle eyes watching. And so there's a lot more people involved in the conversation who can help define what this industry can look like, and industry or this community or this processing, what it can look like, such that it is inclusive, and that it doesn't look like cannabis in the same way that cannabis did not have equity and equal access to entrepreneurship. And so, the goal is that now that there is so many eyes on this, that we can really craft an industry that works for the most amount of people.
How does that unfold? Because, right, that fear of a corporate takeover. No one wants a corporate takeover of this industry.
Correct.
How can you possibly prevent that from happening? Is there going to be like a mushroom rush now in Colorado? Do you think that's a thing?
Well, I mean, the decriminalization piece of this bill really creates a room for people to build their community around psychedelics their own way. And as far as the industry, once it becomes regulated, I mean, so this is the order of things. So the state has until the end of January to build out a 15-person advisory panel. Applications are open now. I can share a link with you to be able to apply to be on that advisory board. And then that advisory board has until actually January 1st, 2024 to establish the rules, to create the rules. That panel is being given to a very diverse group of people, a very particular, a lot of, veterans, indigenous, BIPOC community, a really balanced group. And that's going to be, it's going to be a challenge. It's an uphill challenge to find the exact right people. And that's why the hope is that there will be a lot of applicants to choose from, and that the group that ends up coming together really has the best interest of the community, the grassroots community at heart. And that's the intention. And so then licensing and application processes will start in September of 2024. But the goal is to really create an industry that is equitable and accessible to all cultures and all communities.
So if you're thinking like, you know what, this is something that's calling me, what would you recommend as a starting place?
I mean, ask a lot of questions, follow some of the great magazines. Double Blind Magazine is a really good one. Read the bill, understand what exactly it looks like. Being on the advisory board is one good model. There's a lot of education. There's a lot of universities that are starting to teach medicine therapy. And so there's just a lot of opportunity for people. So if you want to have if you want to have a retreat business that offers psilocybin, you can start doing that immediately. If you want to be licensed under the state, you might invite a different clientele. So there's a lot of opportunity however you want to approach this, whether it's you want to learn how to be a therapist or a sitter, or you want to open a retreat center, or you want to learn to cultivate or manufacture or do research. So there's a lot of different avenues. But, it's always funny. The question is always like, how is this, different than cannabis? Like the cannabis industry is all about cultivation. Cultivation is a huge market in cannabis. And this is not really that kind of industry. And so, there's a lot of people who have the capacity to craft their business, like you're saying, and to be able to serve or consume in a way that's safe. And then, of course, the biggest thing is education. There were people that saying that we have about 3 years before the opinions are solidified. Like we have to craft everything now. We have to be in front of the conversation now on what we want and how we want this to look.
Interesting, because it gets solidified and then it's too hard to shift.
Yeah, like the idea is that, right now there's so much, it's a little chaotic. Nobody knows. And so people are learning. And so in this learning, we have the opportunity to gear the education towards a more equitable and a more community-minded model of business. And so that's what's being developed right now in the community at large. Who's in the front? Who's on stage? Who's actually offering the messaging? What kind of businesses are talking about psychedelics? Who's offering the education? What kind of standards for education are there? I mean, are you going to have 150 hours of schooling and then you'll be qualified to sit with somebody who has severe PTSD? What's the standard for how education looks and how we sit with people on their deathbeds or as they suffer through severe anxiety or depression. And so teaching people what that looks like, now is the time that we are really like the community, the psychedelic community at large is like gearing up to really put out the word, because like you said, people don't know, and they don't know where to turn. And so the goal right now is to be able to bring education forward as a primary objective, even before really regulations. In order to give qualified regulations, we need to educate the regulators as well as the influencers of that space.
Yeah, I'm realizing how many different sort of areas this could support. There's certainly a hospice element to this. There's absolutely a PTSD element. There's also, a depression. Like there's almost like a retail retreat sort of track. And then there's a real therapeutic mental health part of it. Right.
Yeah. There's like retreat for like well people. And then there's like therapeutic centers. So yeah, that'll be like kind of the distinction between being a licensed facilitator and being a retreat holder, and being able to serve. And so, how those look, that's all coming online in the next year or 2 years. Like we really need to understand like who's qualified and how we qualify them to sit, and then how we vet people, patients and therapists. Like the vetting process is also very important. So again, that's a piece for education. Like I have X situation, where do I go to get the best service that will help me the most?
This is not new to the community at large here in Colorado. This kind of therapy, this kind of support, this kind of medicine has, frankly been available here. But that hasn't really been the case in the rest of the country. And I'm wondering, when you've watched Michael Pollan's How to Change Your Mind and you're thinking, I want this for me. We're not set up yet for that to be accessible.
Yeah, not yet. I would say another 2, 3, 5 years,
oh, wow.
To be able to facilitate people's mental health repairs, and we're not there yet. And this is going to be slow. Like we're really at the very, very beginning. There's still so much education that needs to happen, and research that needs to happen, and community building, especially community building, that needs to happen. Like you said, Coloradans, 301 passed in Denver in 2019. So that Denver was the first in the country to create that. So, obviously people in Colorado are more open, more receptive to it, but that's not the goal. The goal is further outreach, further access. Like, how do we educate people? How do we educate the states that have said no to cannabis? Like, how do we educate people that are kind of scared of drugs, or, consider psilocybin to be on the same plane as heroin? We have to do big outreach. That's my biggest goal and commitment. Like I know we started this conversation in the business of, but there's not really the business of until we really have education like platforms. And it's all starting. I'm so optimistic. I'm really excited. I know that the opportunity to go out into the world outside of our safe little bubble, our wellness and health conscious bubble that Colorado is. I mean, forget cannabis and psychedelics, which launched in Colorado. I mean, we have these beautiful mountains that people have spaciousness to heal and help themselves. And so to be able to go out into the world and the rest of the country and help educate, bringing more veterans to talk about their experiences, more people who have been healed of their severe mental health illnesses with a couple of doses of psilocybin, and to be able to share those stories with people that aren't necessarily inside our bubble. The conservative voters mostly voted no in Colorado. And so a lot of the conversations that I've had was, they're the people we need to talk to next. Like all these counties that voted no in Colorado, that's the outreach.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's reach outside of our community and actually help educate the people that really don't understand and just see, natural medicines and just say drugs, and they don't understand. And then, I've seen oppositional commentary that was like, oh, first mushrooms, then heroin, like that's the mentality. And so the hope is that we could just bring the conversation to the people and help bring knowledge and wisdom to those outside of our inner circles. And that's a commitment that I have. And while I'm still waiting for licensing to kick off, which, we got 18 months or so before that happens, my intention is to just do outreach and communicate with people and help educate those who really just don't understand or don't know.
Yeah, I think it's easy to forget what the general sense of what mushrooms is when you step outside of, Denver. Certainly I sensed a shift in 2019. It's sort of been an exponential normalization of it, at least here. And thinking about the number of times that I've experienced a conversation with someone who tried mushrooms for the first time, and their first thing that they're saying out of that experience is, if everyone did this, the world would be like so much more peaceful and loving. Yeah, I'm really leaning into what you're saying about making sure that the education and the conversation that's happening is kind of steering clear of the recreational part of it and really focusing on the good and the healing that this plant medicine really can do.
Yeah, there's definitely, there's a lot of fear. And, one thing I want to bring in is that there is a lot of the people that were opposed to this bill were afraid of the corporate takeover. They were afraid of out-of-state money. They were afraid that there wouldn't be enough equity. They were afraid that there would not be enough Indigenous mentorship, leadership, and guidance. And something that I learned, again, like I said, I just got this massive download this week at the Psychedelic Remind Day in Vegas. But something that they said was like, we hear a lot about set and setting, but there's another piece to it called the matrix, which is, what is the programming that we come in with? So I've heard say that psychedelics are a force multiplier, meaning that if you come in with a certain headset, it amplifies that. So it's not necessarily that everyone who does mushrooms is going to have a beautiful, magical, sweet experience, right? If you are coming in with a matrix of victimization and pain and just and you don't have somebody to facilitate you, it might force multiply and actually become worse. And so a lot of my, gentleness around this bill is just recognizing that this culture and the world that we live in is suffering. We have a global PTSD, there's personal PTSD, and then there's this global experience. And so, at the heart of it, I just want to see more of that compassionate leadership helping guide experience, and that the Indigenous representation, the BIPOC representation is something that is underneath psychedelics. It's outside of psychedelics. And we're seeing it in there because it's already part of our culture. And that as a culture, we need to grow towards having a healthier community. And so my hope is that with the right education and the right leadership, we can bring in a matrix shifting goal of being able to have more of a balanced community with all of these issues. And so, I'm seeing a lot of opportunity for us to be able to help create an ecosystem of psychedelic consumption that is based in community and healing and support.
That's a lovely vision.
I know, you got to stay optimistic. I'm a perpetual optimist, sometimes to my demise.
You have to, though. I mean, if you have to keep your North Star what you want and not what you don't want, right? That's, at least in my experience, that's kind of how you have a better chance of actually accomplishing what you want is to have what you want be the vision.
It's funny that you mentioned the North Star. There's actually a community called North Star. The website is called northstar.guide. And I just pulled it up. It says perspectives on ethics, impact, and psychedelic wisdom from leaders across the psychedelic field. And, there's an ethics pledge that businesses can sign on to create a community of ethical and, community-minded equality in this industry. So I definitely recommend people look at that website, northstar.guide. They were represented at the event that I went to this week as well. So that's a really good place to start that people should look at.
Oh my God, that's hilarious. I love that just happened.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful website too. Yeah, they're really good. Yeah, their vision is, I'm just going to read it right off their website. It says, "We envision a future where the businesses delivering psychedelic healing are profoundly shaped by psychedelic wisdom, committed to not replicate the world as it is, but to model the world as it could be."
I just got the chills. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Yes. Let's all lock that in. That is a really perfect vision.
So stepping back to 122 for a second, just kind of on the heels of speaking about that North Star, like the fact that there's a decrim first model in Colorado, that's going to give people more access to tap in and touch what psychedelics could do for them. And, there's a lot of opportunity for people to explore, experiment, macro dose and go deep in, or microdose and make their lives, I like to say, 10% better, to be able to share and just grow as humans. And obviously the psychedelic movement is such a strong commitment to our well-being as a community and a culture. And so it's just really exciting to me to that this is so expansive, and it's the beginning, right? Colorado's the beginning. We'll see in the next 10, 15, 20 years so many more states coming online. I mean, even cannabis, we're at 20 something states with legal cannabis at this point, and every state that comes online is better than the past, and we are getting better. We are learning from mistakes. And Colorado was in such a hurry. There was so much talk and so many years discussing the cannabis regulations that, but when it came time to actually write the bills, they were just done really quickly. They were done quickly. And so they were done a little recklessly in a way. And so that's why the industry ended up being so inequitable. And as I'm witnessing, each state that comes online is doing better than the previous ones. And I deeply believe that psychedelics as a movement, as an industry, will do better than cannabis, just like cannabis did better than tobacco. Somebody mentioned tobacco, and, tobacco is a sacred indigenous plant as well. And look how many people are suffering at the hands of tobacco based on the way this culture has created an industry. And so cannabis is better than tobacco. We have quality product. We have accountability on the way this product gets offered to consumers. And I just really believe that psychedelics will continue that stream and do better. And we will have a better industry and a better program and better education and better leaders and better business owners and better safe environments for consumption.
Do you ever look back at all of the sort of anti-cannabis arguments that were made and want to be like, see, turns out the sky's not falling because we legalized weed? Right?
Yeah. I mean, I like to see, I just feel that as we grow as humans, year over year, we just are getting smarter and a little bit more socially conscious and socially intelligent. my voice is simply a metaphor for so many others who are focusing on a very intentional, equitable industry and community. And so I see the evolution of the psychedelic realm. Colorado is just a really good space. And I just believe that the next states and the next towns and the next communities that bring it on are just going to keep doing better. I really see that, and I believe in the optimism and the opportunity for us to really share with the people who need it most.
How do you encapsulate why equity is so important to someone who maybe hasn't thought a lot, maybe isn't very conscious to why it's important to lean into it?
In our culture, the wealthy white men mostly are the ones that just get to jump forward fastest with the most resources. They get to buy the properties in cannabis and hire the best and move the quickest and get all the content crafted. And so to be able to make it symmetrical and actually a healthy balance, we need to prioritize minorities, women, veterans, disabled folks who have not had the resources to get in the front of this conversation. And so by prioritizing those communities, what we're actually doing is making a more balanced ecosystem. So mushrooms now, but ibogaine, DMT, and mescaline, not including peyote, are going to be considered. They are decriminalized currently, but they will be considered for regulation only in June of 2026.
And why is that? Is it because it's just too much to try to take on all of those things at once?
Yeah, and we need to, there's a need to kind of build the trust of the community first. Let's see what it looks like with a regulated model, and let's use mushrooms, which is the easiest to produce, is very sustainable. Obviously, ayahuasca and peyote are extremely rare plants and are, they're not bottomless. They take 30 years to produce, whereas you could supply the entire state of Colorado on one warehouse of mushrooms, for a year, and it doesn't take much. So it's an easy product to create, and so to be able to craft an industry or an ecosystem based on mushrooms will help determine how we move forward with some of these a little bit more sensitive, delicate, stronger, definitely more intensive, experiences like DMT, ibogaine, and mescaline.
It's always fun to pick your brain, and I just learned so much hearing from you and hearing about all of these nuances and considerations that are going into what could be a very significant shift in public health, in culture, in the way that we have death in this country. Like I see the possibilities there of a lot of disrupting, and I'm here for it. So
me too.
Right? It's about time.
Yeah, I'm excited to help the living, but the whole concept of, like you said, the conscious dying is just people deserve that. People deserve to walk into their death with less fear.
Yeah.
And psilocybin is a really good tool to help with that. And so that excites me a lot. Being a death doula is something that I want to pursue in this life. And we'll get there once we have a really strong research and development on how we approach that in the best way.
Amazing. So I always like to end with, can you think of what was one of your most feral moments as a child, like wild child, like something that you did that was not typical for certainly kids of this generation, right?
That's awesome. It's such a good question. I don't know if this is a good answer because it's not quite childhood, but, I spent my 20s hitchhiking across the country. I graduated college at, 21 and left. And I with my mom's blessing, though she was scared, she gave me her blessing. And I hitchhiked from Seattle all the way to Guatemala, all the way through US, San Diego, the Baja, Mexico, and spent a year in each country hitchhiking. And I think everything I am today is an effect of saying yes to life and surviving at that level. I think it's a really healthy way to learn about who I am and what is important to me. And everything I am today is definitely an effect of that experience. There's a really great book called Range. I can't remember the author in this moment, but it's called Range. And what he talks about in the book is how those who lived their early lives with all diversity of experience are usually the ones who make the best leaders because they have so much experience in the diversity of life. And I've always really appreciated that concept, and traveling and hitchhiking and saying yes to whichever car stopped, and figuring out their motives and understanding why they stopped and being somebody who could, my answer to always this, what are you doing? Is always, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to do a good deed for somebody else.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, Amy, I love talking to you. You're just such a sprite of good energy and sunshine. And thank you for inviting me.